Super excited to be here to tell you guys about some of the design story behind the all-new 2018 Wrangler. And so to redesign an icon, we go back to day one, the 1941 Willys. So understand that this was never meant to be a consumer product. It was simply a solution to a military issue. So the Army realized that they had kind of worn out the horse and they needed to move people around in a lightweight vehicle, something that was very nimble, needed four-wheel drive, and it needed to house 4 passengers. So almost 80 years later, the vehicle retains much of that form follows function type of mentality, and even retains most of that classic silhouette. Also, while we're talking about iconic, I think it's important to look back at the face of Jeep over time. So it began with the little 9-slot grille and the small headlights, and really the grille bars were just there to keep the radiator from getting smashed. So when it became a civilian Jeep, it got the big, goofy federalized headlights, so it kind of got that cartoon face, and that necessitated dropping the 2 outside grille elements. So this was really the birth of the 7-slot grille. Then there's the CJ5, which is one of my favorites because at that point I feel like they started to get things all right. The fenders, the hood, design kind of played a role in it. The little elements that we've kind of baked into the new JL. In 1987, you had the YJ, important for many reasons, one of which is that's when it became the Wrangler, as the name that we still use to this day. And then in 1997, the TJ came along, which is another one of my favorites, partly because it has a lot of those earlier styling cues from the CJs, but it also has what I call the trapezoidal shape of the grille. JK is where the vehicle got to the size that it is today, and of course it made the big jump from the 2-door to the 4-door body style. So next, again, you see some of these elements of the CJ series that we picked up for the new Wrangler. This little invasion of the headlights into the grille. The trapezoidal wheel arches, which have found their way onto almost every Jeep since 1941. The fender vent that was kind of inspired by the mismatch of the MBs. The folding windshield, super important to the Wrangler. And in the beginning it was done in a very simple kind of bed frame shape and just kind of folded down. The TJ. The grille shape with the little bit of a brake, which you can kind of see running across here. It also has that element of the hood, kind of a power bulge, which we've kind of designed into the new one as well. So although the vehicle is all new, it retains a lot of those elements that are inspired by the older vehicles. So as our designers put pen to paper, we used what's called a shotgun approach, where we explored lots of different proportions and styles, ranging from more rugged and playful to some of a bit more of a sporty and sophisticated approach. It's interesting to note here that the guys always sketch 2 doors, and I think that goes back to that iconic little Jeep. You know, when you think of Jeep, it's the first thing that comes to mind is that little CJ style 2-door. So you can see some of the elements that they're pressing here. Trapezoidal wheel arches, the folding windshield, the spare tire, the little fender vent details, the taillights, which are not integrated into the body, which is actually an element that we picked up when we did the Renegade. The clip corners on the doors, super important when you're off-road and you're at a tilt, opening the door and not worrying about that corner getting smashed. And then, like I mentioned, the trapezoidal face, with that very rugged, separate front and rear bumpers. Again, not integrated into the fascia like most other SUVs. So, some fun sketches. As we developed the design, we wanted to find a balance between rugged and refined. So you can see here, you know, the 4-door there, the windshield folded down. It's got that a little bit of faster profile. The separate fenders from the body, the trapezoidal wheel arches, the front wheels pushed all the way forward so that we could really get that aggressive approach. And then even some elements on the back. You can see that the spare tire, which feels super natural sitting on the back of the Jeep. Rubicon, of course, gets its own personality with special trim, rock rails, all-terrain tires, and a suspension that's obviously tuned for off-road prowess. And let's have a look now inside the new Wrangler. So there's 2 main words you're going to hear me repeating a lot when I talk about the interior. And the first is refined. So simply put, this is the most refined Wrangler ever. It has more conveniences, more comfort, more connectivity than ever before. More of what people expect from any new car. The challenge became how to design these niceties into something that was authentically Wrangler. Here again, we started by looking to our past for inspiration. So the early Jeep vehicles, like the MB and the CJs, and even the YJ, had kind of a wide and lean instrument panel. Really, they were just stamped metal panels with instrument gauges punched into them. So as time went forward, the proportion became more vertical as we had to bake in things like airbags, glove boxes, and modern electronics. Aesthetically, our goal was to decipher that early Jeep DNA and really kind of bring our designs into that. So when we started sketching, we pulled in the confident horizontal lines from the early Willys to make this vehicle feel wider and more spacious than the outgoing vehicle. We added the trapezoidal elements from the CJ soft top pad to give that instrument panel a little bit more of technical precision. So again, when you look at the authentic side of Wrangler and then the refined side, you'll see that we marry these details in. So let's look at some of the premium materials. You have the wrapped instrument panel with live stitching, real metal plating, and then the rubber overmolded touch points in areas that you actually interact with, like the radio surround and the grab handle. You'll notice that these really start to marry the refinement side of things as well as the rugged side of things. Then you've got the Wrangler exclusive features that we love to play with. For example, the front and rear locker switch, which is more intuitive than it's ever been before. And then, of course, you have to the right of it, you have the switch bank, which is good for being able to, to integrate things like auxiliary lights. Because let's be honest, after about 5 minutes, everyone wants to start putting their own touches onto the Wrangler. Of course, the doors. Anyone who's taken a Wrangler door off of the last model knows that it takes a little finesse. We really started thinking about that this time around, and we wanted to make sure that we designed that into it. So if you have the chance to take a door off, it's actually quite a bit easier than it has been in the past. So looking at technology, the cluster has a real-time T-case display, so it's always right there in the dial. And then the center is a 7-inch reconfigurable display where you can have a variety of information, off-road pages included. Of course, there's connectivity. We've got a media center in the lower center stack and 50% larger center console storage. We wanted to make sure that we designed this car to be used as people actually used cars. So where you see it says, where you see the cup holder, it says flexible mobile storage device, and that's because essentially a place to put your phone is the modern day cup holder, right? And that's, what do people do? They put their phones everywhere. So even as the number 3 phone you see there, even when you have 2 cups, you still have a good place to put your mobile device. Looking at other areas of the interior, if you see the utility grid on the back of the seats, that's inspired by backpacks. The trail rail cargo management system on the lift gate and the rear compartments, both very useful. And then because we added 4 inches to the wheelbase, the majority of that went into the space between the front and the rear seat, which increases the level of comfort for the back seat passengers. Also, the angle of the back seat is a more generous level of reclined for better comfort. Then the armrest folds down, and there's adaptable storage in there. And even the back of the front console, you have the HVAC, the dual USBs, all there to add modern comfort and conveniences for the rear seat customers as well. If you look at the steering wheel, there's a Willys Y-spoke motif, one of the small Easter eggs that I'll give you guys for free. And that, of course, comes from the original Willys steering wheel. But we didn't do it in a super literal way. We wanted it to be a little bit more sophisticated and have a little bit more of a modern indicated way so that it's not too obvious. Then, of course, being a little bit more obvious is the Willys silhouette on the shifter, because that's just a classic that everyone instantly recognizes. And if you go to the historical collection, you'll see the original data plaques on the dash of the old Jeeps. And we've got one of those on the tailgate with some basic information about the Wrangler, the breakover, water fording lines. And it's just one of those neat details that we feel is very important to the heritage and we wanted to bring back into this Jeep. Of course, you can't have a beautifully functional form without having the right color palette for it. So the Sport and Sahara have a painted mid-bolster with a grills texture, and it's a very deep silver, so it has a nice flop to it, and it catches a lot of highlights and dark shadows. And it's accented by the platinum rings on the vents. And if you go to the upper level, or the upper end of Sahara, you get a leather-wrapped mid-bolster, which really, with the accent stitching, it really kind of pulls that word refinement into the interior. So it really stretched the range all the way up through the premium Sahara in both colors and material choices. And then, of course, you have the very iconic color combination of the Rubicon with its red accents everywhere. So we've pulled that into the interior. The mid-bolster is now reticle red, which is the same as the locker switch. And you've got those same red accent stitching on the steering wheel, the seats, and of course the platinum metal fascias on the vent surrounds. Now, depending on the exterior color you pick, you can also get the mid bolsters in that grill's texture as well. So if you look at the lineup as it existed in the past, and then you add the JL to that, I think you'll find that it fits in there perfectly. It harkens back to that nice wide aspect ratio of the early ones, but it's got all the modern conveniences that I've never before seen in a Wrangler. So the JL adds a new chapter to the Jeep story, and it enhances the Wrangler to a new level of refinement and capability. But it really, and this is the important part to us, is that it stays true to that rugged, the rugged roots it has as an ultimate adventure vehicle. Thanks, guys.